Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Get to Know, the podcast where you get to know about people that have followed their God-given passions into careers, lifestyles, life-changing moments, and so much more. And I got a great show today. You may be saying, Captain, you look, tip top a little bit more on your toes. Well, I am. I dug in deep into the Salvation Army pocket and brought the big bosses on. We are so blessed today to be joined during this National Salvation Army Week, as when you'll be seeing this, with the commissioners of the Eastern Territory, Commissioners Bukiewicz. They are new here about a year and have jumped right into all of the amazing work here. So you may see your local officers at your local Salvation Army, your volunteers, and think to yourselves, is that all there is? Well, friends, there's definitely not all there is. So let's sit back and as we get to know the Commissioners Bukiewicz.
From Psalm 86, verses 11 through 13. Teach me your ways, O Lord, that I may live according to your truth. Grant me purity of heart, so that I may honor you. With all my heart I will praise you, O Lord my God. I will give glory to your name forever, for your love for me is very great. You have rescued me from the depths of death.
Hi, I'm Commissioner Ralph Bukiewicz, Territorial Commander for the USA Eastern Territory. Welcome to Sunday Scripture. I'm reading from John 13:34 and 35. It says, "So now I am giving you a new commandment. Love one another. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples."
All right, we're going to bring them in right now. Commissioners Ralph and Susan Bukiewicz. Commissioners, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Absolutely.
Our
Hello,
pleasure.
Captain Mike.
I got to start off by saying I went to put that video together, and Commissioner Sue,
I know.
need you need to get in front of the camera a whole lot more, because I had so many more videos and pictures of your husband, but I had to dig deep for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to stay away from the camera as much as I can.
Well,
That's the truth. Yeah.
He's in the director's role instead.
There you go.
And,
Yeah.
you know,
I'd much rather direct.
seeing you're using your home title, Territorial President of the World.
yes, I said that on there, and so I was going to say the second thing we need to address is: are you petitioning for a new position in the Salvation Army here, or is that at home? That's what happens.
No, well, that is at home, but also, I don't know why not.
Eh,
I don't why not. I think I'm qualified.
well, absolutely. So I have up your guys' little bio, and I should say it should be little, but instead you have almost a book of just places you've been. From Michigan, Indiana, from the Central Territory, which is the Midwest of the United States, the Southern Territory, which would be the Southeast of the United States, to national headquarters in Washington. You guys have become quite like Dora the Explorer through the Army, have you not?
We really have. And, we never expected to leave our home territory. But, what a journey. It has been incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we should
we've enjoyed every second of it. Yeah.
I could see through the pictures I found was there. And I should explain to those that may be not familiar, there's going to be a lot of Salvation Army talk in here. When you get Salvationists together, we have our own vocabulary and a book that we go by. But if you're wondering what is a territory, what is the Eastern Territory, the commissioners are in charge, command, as we call it, of the Eastern Territory, which is Maine down in a reverse L to Northern Kentucky. And it's quite a bit of land, quite a bit of Salvation Armies, quite a bit of people.
Yeah.
But also on top of that, they not just serve as leaders for the churches, they also serve in a pastoral role for the leaders of our leaders. And so there's quite a bit of responsibility. And so I just think I want to say again, thank you guys for coming on. And I got to know and ask, and I'll start with you, Commissioner Sue, and then go to you, Commissioner Ralph. How did you find the Salvation Army? How did your journey here begin?
Well, I was born into a Salvation Army family. My parents were Corps officers and ARC officers all of my life. My mom and dad were the only Corps officers I ever had. And so I grew up in this church, and I realized at an early age that I wanted to follow in their footsteps. I saw a way of life, a way of living, two people that that the Lord brought together through almost impossible means, and they had a beautiful ministry together in every community they served. And I just knew at an early age I wanted that for my life.
That's being growing up in it and seeing it firsthand. I know my kids talk about it all the time about what they see there. Well, how about you, Commissioner Ralph? How did your journey in the Salvation Army begin?
Good question, Captain Mike. I'm a first generation Salvationist. I didn't grow up in the Salvation Army. And in fact, I attended another church when I was a little boy. But here's how I probably best describe my early childhood. I was a broken kid that was born from broken parents, and I grew up in a broken neighborhood, and I was rescued by the Salvation Army. Both of my parents were visually handicapped. They were both blind, and the Salvation Army had a very unique ministry to reach out to families of those who were blind in my hometown of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so I was one of the beneficiaries of their service. Every Christmas, one of the few toys underneath our Christmas tree came from the Salvation Army. We got a big box of groceries from them as well. And they were these caring, loving, wonderful people who wore these goofy outfits, who really expressed God's love in a way that was overwhelming.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's so amazing. And this is not obviously it's about you guys, but it's this conversation. I got goosebumps, Commissioner, because Commissioner Sue, my wife is 7th generation Salvation Army. So I'm sorry, she's 6th, so our kids are 7th.
Yeah.
So her lineage goes way far back. Her grandparents, aunts, uncles, great grandparents, etc., were officers. Her great grandfather bought the building that's now Northern New England DHQ. She always remembers.
Is that right?
It did, yes.
How about
So, but I am first generation, and
Wow.
so it's funny you say that, Commissioner Ralph. What you said, I tell people in my testimony, I was a project kid. Got into the Army through the food bank. The social service director was also the YPSM, which for those of you who don't know, we call it Young Person Sergeant Major. It's a fancy military term for youth pastor. And she invited us, and they said the magic words, "We'll come pick you up." And my parents said, absolutely. And I tell people, I was saved by the Salvation Army because God used the Salvation Army to save me. And that I'm one of a handful of people that came out of my neighborhood that aren't, still in the system or in jail or on welfare, et cetera, even in my own family. And so it's funny, that correlation with us and but we hear that story 10 times, 100 times over of the Army being there, whether it be growing up in it or being on the outside. We see the works. So then in seeing in hearing this, you guys must have complete opposite journeys of finding out that, Commissioner, so you already started to touch on it, that God's given you a passion to serve. Now in the church, we call that a calling.
Right.
God's placed a calling on our hearts to do something. So I guess how did you find out that this was your passion to serve? And maybe linchpin, one of you guys can decide, how did you find it together? How did you guys get together and find you were going to do ministry together?
Well, for me, growing up in the church, I knew there had to come a point in my life when the faith in God that my parents had to become my personal faith. And, growing up in the church, it's easy to say, oh, I've always been a Christian, or I've always been a Christ follower.
I
But
call it Christianese.
that's
You
right.
have the right words, Christianese.
Yeah. But I knew from the teaching of my mom and dad that there had to come a time when there was a crisis of faith in my life, that I called out to Jesus Christ and said, I am a sinner and I need salvation. And Jesus, will you save me? So I did that as a young girl in one of the programs we had at the Salvation Army for little girls called Sunbeams. And that changed my life completely. So in the same way that the Salvation Army saved you and saved Ralph, the Salvation Army saved me by giving me an opportunity to discover my faith journey and my salvation story on my own.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
so that just grew. I lived as much as I could at our local Salvation Army church. Loved being there. As soon as school was done, I wanted to be at the church with my 4 sisters. And by the way, all 5 of us are Salvation Army officers.
Amen. Love it.
That's just the impact that the work the Salvation Army through the Lord has given us to do has been the fulfillment of our lives.
Mm.
So it's been a beautiful thing for us. Yeah.
Well, Commissioner Ralph, how did you find your calling to serve and start on this journey as an officer?
Well, again, part of my salvation experience came through the ministry of the Salvation Army. And even though I faithfully attended another church growing up, all that I gained was just religious knowledge. There was never any connection there, nor was there any opportunity to ever transfer that knowledge into a heart experience,
Right.
and something that would transform my life. But it was really at age 14 when I was invited to attend music camp at the Salvation Army during the summer, that the message really just resounded and connected all that I was learning up here with the absolute deep need of my own heart. And so I began this journey of attending the Salvation Army and learning more about it. And the neat thing is that we were given opportunities as teenagers in the Corps to be able to do ministry and to be able to reach out. I became a YPSM, one of those youth pastors in my home Corps. And we'd go out all day Saturday doing children's open airs and visitation for Sunday. And then we'd spend the afternoon on Sunday doing follow-up and things like that. So it was just kind of a natural thing. Right. And it not only brought fulfillment, but we found that we were part of a real team.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
was kind of sold out to
a community.
To what God needed us to do.
Yeah.
And more, my Corps officer talked to me about officership. And initially I said, why would I do that?
Right.
It again, just never connected and resonated. But he very clearly explained to me what I was doing and how I could do that continually as a minister in the Salvation Army. So I took, in many ways, a leap of faith. And I didn't feel prepared. I didn't feel ready. I didn't feel qualified. But I said, okay, if God can do something with me, here I am.
Right. And real quick, this with this being National Salvation Army Week, yes, you can expect this to be a little bit of a commercial. We have a saying in the Army, it says camp changes lives. And so if you're watching this and you have if you are a kid or a teen or you're watching this and you have kids, reach out to see about going to Salvation Army camp. It changed my life. That's where I got my calling. And the work of the Salvation Army, a lot of times, we hear a lot of, oh, I didn't know. I didn't know you did that. Right. I didn't know that happened. But in my journey, you were talking about not feeling qualified. I'm sure there's a lot of people watching that don't feel like they're qualified to do a lot of the things they want to do. And, in the field they want to do it. And I remember when I was a youth pastor getting preparing to go to training, I got very famous quote when around early 2000s. God doesn't call the qualified; He qualifies the called.
Exactly.
And He mounds and forms. And in that, Commissioner Ralph, I'll start with you. Did you find struggles along the way? You said you kind of drove into the deep end. So it's Christianity in general, but let alone leadership, isn't all Skittles and unicorns. There's struggles. So did you find those in your journeys, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I think it began even at the time I went to training. I'm now finishing up my 45th year of officership. And when I was first commissioned and ordained, I discovered that I was the youngest officer in the nation.
Wow.
And I know that because in the year that I was ordained, all 4 territories came together for one combined commissioning. So we compared notes on, who had the most kids, who was the oldest, who was the youngest.
I feel bad for whoever had to organize the housing for that.
Yeah. Well, and we discovered that even when I went in charge of my first appointment, I wasn't old enough to sign the checks. I didn't have power of attorney. I legally couldn't do that, but I was responsible for everything else.
There you go, young buck. Start over.
I felt I was just too young.
Yeah.
And that people either wouldn't respect me because of my youthfulness, or that I wouldn't have that credibility of being able to really handle the responsibilities of ministry, even though that was the deepest desire of my heart.
That is a huge thing for teenagers, and I had that verse up on my wall as a youth pastor. 1 Timothy, do not let anyone look down upon you because you are young. Be a witness to people. And I just this past Sunday talked about I go back to Eliza Shirley. Coming here, for those who don't know, Salvation Army was started in the United States by a 16-year-old girl who came into a abandoned chair factory right here in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and she got the word out because she went to a bunch of looky-loos that were looking for a fire. And so you find a way, and God helps you find that way. Commissioner Susan, being on the inside, growing up in it, and then jumping in a leadership role. A lot of people think that's going to be an easier path, but it's not. Could you share some of your, the struggles that you had going from, growing up in the Army to now dedicating your career, your vocation to the Army?
Well, even in my childhood, and seeing what great leaders in the Corps, in the churches, my parents were. I personally felt that I did not have a prayer of being like them, being able to lead the way they did. I'm an introvert, and I'm one of four girls in the family. I am one of the oldest. I have a twin, and that we're the oldest. But I was always the quiet one.
Yeah, that's why I couldn't find pictures of you online. See, that's what it is.
If you ask any of my sisters, they'll disagree with me, but they have faulty memories.
Okay.
But I looked at the men Jesus chose to be his disciples.
Yeah.
And come on, you can't really argue with those choices. They were just normal guys that if the world looking at them would say they've got nothing to offer.
And did.
And for a long time, I felt that way, but I knew I had this burning in my soul to be of service to the church. I knew God wanted me to serve his church. And in whatever community God placed me in, I knew that that's where he wanted me to be. My dad could have been the mayor of any community he and my mom were in. He was always involved in community activities, always involved in disaster response. He ran canteens as a Corps officer, and that always spoke to me that my calling was not only to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, but to serve an entire community.
Right.
You know, the whole community was going to be my parish.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that if God could call these individuals to be his disciples, he could certainly use me in whatever capacity he chose. And I just wanted to make myself available to him.
Yeah, you know, people just don't think of that. I think getting into ministry, if they get a calling into whatever ministry, and officership is definitely a unique one. But you know, we have so many ministers in the Salvation Army that are not officers,
Right.
You know, that are from our janitors up, like our volunteers. We are all minister in some way, and I've recently really leaned into, you know, the story of David and everything that, if you look in the Old Testament, all the stuff he went through and all the times he got angry or upset or didn't feel good enough and all this. And yet down the road, Jesus says, is man after my own heart.
Exactly.
You know, and so that's like the lofty goal to get there. Now, in the Salvation, there's definitely struggles to get in the Salvation Army. So, you know, ministry, whatever level. You guys are blessed to be, I hope you feel blessed to be in the positions you are now, of high leadership in the Army. We are here on the field, as we call it, you know, look to you guys for guidance and for vision and everything else. But within that are opportunities. I'll quickly share what I'm thinking to kind of guide you. When I was in training, you know, we were known for dancing in Manhattan and at the Kettle, and we would, you know, to draw attention. And so it's about 2013. And so I remember one day being at the Kettle and dancing with my partner, and we're at Penn Station. We're right on 8th there, outside of the Madison Square Garden. And the Wall Street Journal had come to interview us. There was a story about us on CNN, and that got word to Wall Street Journal. And so we're getting interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, and here I am, this project kid, you know, that had dropped out of school, went back to school because of an officer, a DYS, Major Kevin Stoops, because of his help and the Majors West Neva Geddes. But I go back to school. And so I'm thinking to myself, what? I'm talking to the Wall Street Journal. Like, what is happening here? And I'm dancing, and there's people coming over and putting in $100 bills because they want to get on camera with the Wall Street Journal. And I'm doing this, and they get done and they leave. And when they leave, I go to take my break, and I would, on my break, take some of the our lunch money, and I would, New York City, grab a couple dollar slices, and I had my homeless people that I would, you know, sit with every day. And I realized that within a 20-minute period, I went from being around people that literally make 7-8 figures to those that are in the most need, and I'm ministering to them both.
Yeah.
And that's like the beauty of the Salvation Army, is that we get to be there. So that was a moment for me where I went, I get to do this. I get to do this. What was that moment for you guys where it was, I can't believe God let me do this?
Ralph, you have to tell your story.
Well, as a young officer, I was invited to attend a conference in Washington, D.C. It was on leadership and ministry. And there were probably 1,500 delegates there. Of those 1,500, 100 of us were invited to go to the White House for a briefing, and it was going to be with the not only White House staff, but then we would see the president and first lady off on the South Lawn as they went to Camp David for the weekend.
Wow!
And so I'm honored. The hotel was within walking distance of the White House, so I can remember walking. It was at the end of June, beautiful summer day. And as I approached the White House, I had to get there early enough to go through security and everything. It was even before what we have now and the tightness of that security, but certainly knew I had to have extra time. There was a guy sitting on the curb, and he looked up and saw me in uniform, And I could tell his eyes immediately recognized the uniform, even though we'd never seen each other before. And he said, "Hey, Captain." And I greeted him back, and I came on over, and I sat down on the curb with him, and he proceeded to tell me his story. I had a little extra time, and he had just left the ARC program. He just graduated, completed
Wow.
it. He told me
Which,
about
by the way,
how
sorry, Commissioner, those watching, ARC is our Adult Rehabilitation Center. So we have hundreds of centers that we rehabilitate thousands of men and women every year from drug and alcohol addiction. So when he says he come out of our ARC, he's recently graduated from that program. Sorry to cut you off. I want to make sure everybody's on the same page.
No, that's helpful, because he had told me about how his own life really had been destroyed, his family, his career, his hopes, by alcoholism.
Right.
And it was through the ministry of the Salvation Army that now he's clean and sober, and he was actually going to be heading up the East Coast to reunite with his family and to try and reconcile and resolve all the brokenness he'd left behind. And just an amazing story, and a wonderful guy. Cars are passing us, and pedestrians, and as far as the rest of the world, we were pretty invisible.
Right.
At least he was. And so I had an opportunity to pray with him, and again, wish him luck as he went one way and I headed off toward the guard station at the White House. And it wasn't until after I had gone in, been a part of that briefing, greeted the president, sent them off. I'm walking back to my hotel. And again, I get to do this. It was because of the Salvation Army uniform that one moment I'm sitting on the curb with a man that much of the world would consider to be invisible. As far as they knew, he was homeless, and they didn't want to make eye contact.
Yeah.
And then 15 minutes later, I'm in the presence of the most powerful leader in the Western world.
Right.
And it's, again, all because of this Salvation Army uniform.
Yeah.
But it's allowed us to go around the world,
Mhm.
and also to be in some of the most desperate, impoverished, heartbreaking situations, as well as opening the doors to those world leaders or those people of influence whose names are well known and popular, and have such a high regard and respect for the ministry of the Army. And again, it's all because of who we represent.
Try to say this without getting all emotional, but this uniform is not just the goofy suit as you saw as a kid. It's our calling card. And this whole podcast is about following your passion, and you never know what it's going to do. But ultimately, for us as a Salvation Army, we want you to follow God's passion because He put a plan in your life, and that plan is to affect others. And very quick story again, sorry, not about us, but about a commercial for the Army. About 2 weeks before we were going to go to training, my wife was visiting someone in the hospital. The corps officer, the pastor, was on vacation and asked if we would go in place, and she had a brand new uniform just from our we call it trade, but that's from our store, and the rest of the uniform is still in the box in the car. And she didn't want to valet the car, and so she parked on the street. And as she went back, she saw smoke coming out of a house. And
wow.
And the door sorry guys, let me all right. And the door opens, and this woman saw my wife in her uniform, and she had her 3 grandbabies and said, "Here are my babies. Can you take them? I need to get my husband."
Oh.
And my wife stayed there that day. I was able to go get our canteen, our disaster vehicle that had actually been sitting dormant for years.
Wow.
And I was able to bring it down for the first time in years. And she opened up the back of her trunk, took out our brand new uniforms, wrapped up those babies, and then we kept them there until proper authorities could come and help the family there. But the trust of this, and it all is from being and it's funny because she asked me, should I wear my uniform? before she left. And I said, yes. And it sounds like something so small, but it's taking that step of even sometimes being uncomfortable in
Yeah.
what God's calling you to do.
Yeah.
Something as simple as putting on a goofy suit.
Yeah.
And
but Captain Mike, what don't you and your wife count that as one of the greatest privileges of your life?
absolutely.
For the Lord to entrust that to you.
Absolutely.
Wow.
I literally just wrote this is happening, full disclosure, this is being viewed National Salvation Army Week in the spring, but this is being filmed in January. We're in a cold spell and we just opened a Code Blue shelter, and just 2 days ago I wrote about a single father that had two twin boys, and I invited him to our programs, and he was very leery. And I spent some time down there at our shelter with them, and a couple hours later, he turned to me and said, "You can take my boys. I trust you completely." And to hear those words are very, very powerful words to hear. I trust you with my children. I trust you with them. So we don't take that for granted.
No.
And for you all, I mean, I'm sure in this moment you don't think about your position now too much because you're in it. There's the quote from The Office: "I wish we knew the good times when we were in them." But as you do your position today, just real quickly, do you see that same, almost daily, like I'm following my calling, and this is the fruits of that? I'm following my passion.
I do, because my calling is all about the people that Christ loves and died for. And they are all around me. They surround us everywhere we go. And if I can make a connection with another human being and somehow just pass on the Spirit of Christ that lives within me, that's what makes my life worth living. So we are still even in this position, and yes, we're blessed to be in these appointments, but we're I think even more challenged. Because there is great work to do. Every single Salvation Army officer and soldier has a great work to do, no matter what our assignments are. So, and it's no different for me and Ralph. But God loves people.
Amen.
And we have to love people. And that's the greatest thing I can do in my life. And that's what God called me to ultimately, to serve his church, which is filled with people, to serve the communities, which are filled with people, and pass on the Spirit of Christ as much as I can.
You hit the Spider-Man quote there, from Uncle Ben, with the great power comes great responsibility. And that doesn't matter what leadership role you have in or out of the church. I think it's important that we know that you are an example to someone. And so what example are you going to be? Well, I want to be respectful of your time. And so before we go out, I didn't get you guys this question earlier on purpose. So I end every interview with the same question. And so I'll start with you, Commissioner Ralph, and then Commissioner Sue, you can speak in. If 12-year-old you, all right, we're here, what advice would you give or knowledge would you give your 12-year-old self now?
Great question. Well, of course, at age 12, I was already starting on a very slippery slope. And I was getting into trouble. I was making self-destructive choices. I was hanging out with the wrong people, and certainly I would have tried to get my attention to be able to speak into the whole transformation that Christ can offer. But even more so, I think if anything, I would have said, I would have encouraged me to turn over the things that I've been carrying and the brokenness sooner, and let God not only redeem that, but to use it for his glory and to transform it into something that is truly impactful. It took a longer time for me to reach that realization, and it is humbled and allowed me to be honored with any grace that God extends. So, to whatever 12-year-old mind can comprehend that, I'd love to try and infuse that.
That's yes, very much along the same lines, and that's why I picked that age. That's usually, when it would start. What about you, Commissioner Sue?
Well, I'm going to try not to get emotional.
That's I struggle with it all the time.
Yeah, because 12-year-old Sue was bullied in school every single day for years, and most of the time I was angry with God because I was suffering and didn't know why. And if I could go back to 12-year-old Susan, I would tell her that God loves her, has a plan for her life, not to harm her, but to give her a hope and a future. And I would tell her that Almighty God is completely trustworthy, and I can trust him with my 12-year-old self, and I can trust him with my 66-year-old self, because God knows what he's doing with my life, and I can put my trust in him. He will never fail me. I wish I'd known that or listened to it.
Right. You heard it. And I have that verse, it's very common but as my life, but I always say it comes in a combo pack, because 12 and 13 in Jeremiah 11 there, it says, and you'll seek me and you find me when you seek me with your whole heart. Not a portion, not a part, not a Christianese, not a Christmas and Easter, whole heart. And this is nothing to do about, yes, this is a commercial about the Salvation Army, but very open on this interview to say this has nothing to do about the Army. This has everything to do with letting the viewers know that you're watching at home that we want you to know three things: that there is a God that loves you, there is a God that died for you, and there's a God that wants a personal relationship with you.
That's right.
And the only way that can happen is if you seek after him. So if you come away, I know that's the knowledge the three of us want to put there. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you guys so much. I know a little bit over. You can, send me a scolding email later. So we can do that. But we are so thankful to have you in our territory. We're so thankful for your leadership. And with this being National Salvation Army Week, we want people to know, if you want to know more about the Salvation Army as a whole and find it in your area, you can go to saconnects.org, and that will have just a whole litany of all of our ministries. If you think that we are just food or toys at Christmas and that annoying red bell, we are so much more. And so to go to saconnects.org and learn more. And commissioners, do you want to say anything else before we leave here today?
Well, Captain Mike, thank you for your time as well and for your ministry. We recognize that the most important things happen on the front lines, and those who labor there are faithful, they're sacrificial, their hours are long, their days are demanding, and we thank God for your faithfulness as well.
Thank you for that. Well, thank you. We appreciate it. Maybe we'll do a follow-up in a couple of years, and we'll see how you guys
before that.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Hey, you guys are welcome back on. I need space and people, so come back on. Absolutely.
Welcome to the Commissioner Sue Show.
Absolutely. We will find a campaign manager for you, and we'll start getting those territorial President of the World commercials going. All right. We are all set. Absolutely.
Great.
Well, thank you all, and thank you all for tuning in. Make sure that you check out more of our Get to Know episodes. We're here just to tell you that there's something big out there for you. God's got something for you, and whatever you feel like it might be, it probably is. So go ahead and pursue that. So thanks for tuning in. Check out our other episodes and check us next time, and stay close to Jesus. Bye, guys.